Today, we're going to tackle one of the most fundamental and, frankly, most misunderstood principles in applied behavior analysis: punishment. Our goal here is to get past all the common assumptions and really understand what this term means in a purely scientific context.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the foundational definition of punishment in ABA. Then we'll look at the two types, positive and negative. After that, we'll highlight the core distinction between them, and we'll finish up by clearing the air on some common misunderstandings. Okay, first things first. We have to draw a really clear line between how we use the word punishment in everyday conversation and what it means scientifically. In applied behavior analysis, the term has a very precise, very neutral meaning. It's all about function, not about feelings.
So here it is. The definition is all about the outcome. A consequence is only consider punishment if and only if it makes the behavior it follows happen less often in the future. It's purely functional. And this right here is the golden rule. It's the most critical piece of the puzzle. If a consequence is applied but the behavior continues or even increases, then from a scientific standpoint, it simply wasn't punishment. The effect is everything. And it's worth noting, ethically and effectively, you almost always pair this with teaching a better replacement behavior. All right, let's dive into the first type: positive punishment. Now, when you hear the word positive here, I want you to think mathematically, like a plus sign. It means something is being added. So the formal definition tells us that a behavior is immediately followed by the presentation or the addition of a stimulus, and it's that added stimulus that causes the behavior to weaken and happen less frequently down the road. A really simple way to think about this is an action happens, and as a direct result, something new, and usually something the person finds unpleasant, is introduced to the situation. Let's look at a few examples. You touch a hot stove. The painful sensation is added, making you less likely to touch it again. A child hits their sibling, a scolding is added, and the hitting decreases. Or maybe a driver speeds on an icy road and crashes. That crash is an added consequence that makes them less likely to speed in those conditions again. You see the pattern? Behavior, added consequence, behavior decreases. Now for the other side of the coin, negative punishment. And as you've probably guessed, if positive was about addition, negative is all about subtraction, or removal. The definition here looks very similar to the last one, but with that one critical change. A behavior is followed by the immediate removal of a stimulus, and it's that removal that causes the behavior to happen less often in the future.
And here's the easy way to remember this one. A behavior occurs, and as a result, something desirable, something the person likes, is taken away.
So for our examples, a teenager breaks curfew, and their car privileges are removed. A student yells out in class, and a token they earned is removed. A child is misbehaving, so dad turns off the TV, removing that fun activity. In every case, something good was taken away, which led to a drop in the problem behavior.
So now that we have both definitions, putting them side by side really makes that core distinction crystal clear. Really, the only thing that separates them is what happens to the stimulus. For positive punishment, a stimulus is added. For negative punishment, a stimulus is removed. It has nothing to do with whether something is good or bad. It's purely mechanical, add versus remove.
But here's the thing, despite that different mechanism, they share the exact same defining outcome. Whether you add something unpleasant or take away something pleasant, for it to be called punishment, the end result has to be a decrease in the future frequency of that behavior. If that doesn't happen, it isn't punishment. Period. Now, because the word punishment carries so much baggage in our everyday language, a few myths pop up all the time that can really get in the way of understanding this principle. So let's set the record straight on a couple of the biggest ones.
Okay, myth number 1, and this is probably the most common. It's the idea that the negative in negative punishment means the procedure is harsh or mean or just generally bad. But the truth is, in ABA, the terms positive and negative are purely mathematical. Positive means to add. Negative simply means to subtract or remove. It carries absolutely zero emotional judgment. Here's another really serious misconception, that punishment is just a clinical-sounding term for physical harm or corporal punishment. The reality is that the principle of punishment is a huge umbrella. It covers a vast range of procedures. Things like a brief timeout, which is really just removing reinforcement, or response costs, like losing a token you've earned, are very common evidence-based examples that don't involve any physical contact at all. So how does this all come together in the real world?
Let's use one final, really clear analogy to make sure the difference between positive and negative punishment is locked in. Think about a speeding driver. An officer giving you a ticket is a perfect example of positive punishment. A fine is added. But having your license suspended is negative punishment. Your driving privilege is removed. Both consequences are designed to make you less likely to speed in the future. But one works by adding something and the other works by taking something away. All right, so let's quickly recap the key takeaways. First, punishment is always defined by its effect. It has to decrease a behavior. Second, positive just means adding a stimulus, and negative just means removing one. And finally, and this is so important from an ethical and practical standpoint, punishment procedures should always be paired with reinforcement. The goal isn't just to stop a behavior, it's to teach a better one to take its place. And that brings us to one last thing to think about. If punishment is mainly about reducing behaviors that are already happening, what do you think is the most powerful principle for building up and teaching new positive skills? That's a great question and a topic for another time. Thanks for joining us.